And I'll end this third video for you on wolfstreet.com, Wolf Richter site. So when will China, their debt bubble, finally blow up? To be honest, I kind of reckon around the same time ours and the rest of them do. Let's see. The upside is fake stability. The downside is too ugly to contemplate. Corporate debt in China has soared to $18 trillion, or 169% of GDP, the largest pile of corporate debt in the world, according to the Worried Bank for International Settlements, or BIS. The OECD has warned about it earlier this year. The New York Fed warned about this debt boom in February and that it could lead to a financial crisis, but that authorities have many tools to control. Don't you love? Remember Bernanke? We still have more tools in the toolbox. It reminded me of the Jerky Boys, the gay guy that he would pretend to be, with the flaming gay guy, I should say. I want to show him my toolbox. So does Ben Bernanke. The IMF regularly warns about China's corporate debt, broken record-like, and did so again just a few days ago, lambasting the authorities for their reluctance to tamp down on the growth of debt. They're telling people that? You mean how you give loans, debt, to countries who you know, the IMF, can't pay for it, and then you come in and say, now we need you to sell off all those public assets, privatization. Our buddies want to buy it for pennies on the dollar. Public works, water, electric, buses, transit, privatize, baby. Knowing they can't pay it back. Yeah, so the IMF, as if they have room to speak on this. The current trajectory, it said, could eventually lead to a sharp adjustment. But that's okay. That's okay. IMF, it's all right. Why? Because the federal central banks around the world, they've got tools in their toolbox. The Chinese authorities, the government, and the central bank, supported by the state-owned megabanks, have allowed some bonds to default, rather than bail them out, to make some kind of theoretical point, and they have been working furiously on a balancing act, tamping down on the credit growth that fuels the economy, and simultaneously stimulating the economy with more credit to keep the debt bubble from imploding. A misstep could create a global mess. That's kind of like starting a fire, throwing gasoline on it, putting the fire out, not quite out, throw some jet fuel on it, put the fire out again, you know. A misstep could create a global mess. You don't think so? You don't say. Everyone knows there's a credit problem in China, but I find that people often forget about the scale. It's important in global terms. Charlene Chu told the Financial Times. And I'm sure that's a miss. Miss Chu, I don't think it's just a credit problem in China. We're talking global debt problem everywhere. And I don't know if you've been looking at the U.S. lately, but it might take your eyes off of China if you did. Back in 2011, when she was still a China banking analyst at Fitch Ratings, she went out on a limb with her radical estimates that there was much more debt than disclosed by the central bank, particularly in the shadow banking system, that banks were concealing risky loans in off-balance sheet vehicles. Oh, you mean just like we do in America? Are too big to fail? Exactly. Okay, so that's the same. And that this soaring opaque debt could have nasty consequences. Her outlandish views at the time have since then become the consensus. Yeah, again, you can poke the stick at China and put them on the spotlight all you want. But it's the same everywhere. We do the same thing. We, quote unquote, cook the books off balance sheet, put them back on balance sheet. Oh, they're looking again, put them off balance sheet, hide them over here. Have the Fed buy $4.5 trillion worth of our junk to keep them really off our balance sheet. And now the Fed's holding it. Doesn't change anything now, does it? There's still the debt. It's still there. See how it's in this hand? Gone. Oh, wow. I guess it's gone forever. No, it's in the other hand. Still has to be dealt with. And this pile of debt is in much worse shape than officially acknowledged, she says in her latest report cited by the Financial Times. She's now with Autonomous Research. She figured that by the year end 2017, bad debt in China could hit 51 trillion won, or 7.6 trillion US dollars, or about 68% of GDP. Whoa. It would take the bad debt ratio to an astronomical 34% of all loans, and way above the 5.3% that the authorities are pro-offering. And the authorities, the government, the central bank, supported by the state-owned banks, are now pulling all levers to keep this under control. What I've gotten a greater appreciation for is how everything is so orchestrated by the authorities, she said. The upside is that it creates stability. The downside is that it can create a problem of proportions that people would think is never possible. We're moving into that territory, she said. By orchestrating this superficial appearance of stability of the bad debt problem, the authorities have over the years allowed and encouraged this problem to get much worse. Chu's methodology, as the Financial Times points out, is not without critics. In particular, her estimate of RMB 51 trillion in bad debt is based on average credit losses across 11 other economies that previously experienced rapid debt increases comparable to China, including Japan in 85 to 97 and the US in 2000 to 2007. But Chen Long, China economist at Gavical Dragonomics in Beijing, Dragonomics. Well, the dragon Chinese, guess that thought it would be kind of cool. Dragonomics in Beijing said this methodology implicitly assumes that an economic crash will eventually occur in China. But if that economic crash doesn't occur, and if the economy continues to grow, credit will perform better and loans won't go bad to that extent, he argues. The government understands this too, hence the mantra that growth must be maintained no matter what the costs are. But since that growth is debt-fueled, and since it's now taking more and more debt to obtain diminishing growth rates, the math gets a little tricky. So an acute crisis does not appear imminent, Chu told the Financial Times. The authorities, combination of central bank and government, control the state-owned mega banks and can tell them to lend more, even to zombie companies, many of them state-owned too, to refinance non-performing debts, to lend to smaller banks that rely on interbank funding, and to support the debt bubble in other ways. This keeps the money flowing. It has kept a credit crisis from toppling the system. And as long as the mega banks have the total support of the authorities, they won't topple either. So where does that leave China short sellers like Cal Bass, who's bet very publicly against the monstrous credit bubble in China and against the yuan? Publicly shorting China, hoping for an implosion, is like daring the Chinese authorities, again, the government, the central bank, and the state-owned mega banks, and their whole apparatus, to come out and crush you. And they do just that to make the point. The yuan, after declining relentlessly from the beginning of 2014 through the end of 2016, is now up over 3% against the US dollar so far this year. Which reminds me of George Soros, who lost $1 billion betting against the markets, who's still betting against it because he really super serial thinks the end of this year, it's for sure this time. And again, everything that I think I've been studying, coming to this conclusion, I feel like I do agree that something's coming at the end of this year financially. September, October, as we usually expect. But they can certainly do what they've been doing, like he's talking about. Keep propping it up. We control the banks now anyways. Give them a loan. Oh, they don't have good enough credit. Doesn't matter. We're giving you the money. Give them a loan. Okay. That corporation is a zombie corporation. It doesn't matter. Give him a loan. Knick-knack, paddywhack, give a zombie corporation a loan. This old China man came rolling home. And so far, the authorities still have this credit bubble under control. They have special tools since they control not only the monetary printing press, but also the lenders and the borrowers. This is why Chu conceded that since her bold pronouncements years ago, she has gotten a greater appreciation for how everything is so orchestrated by the authorities. The upside is the current fake stability. The downside is too ugly to contemplate. Where will it go? How will it end? China's efforts to keep the debt bubble under control already impacted in the U.S., where the last big enthusiastic buyer, China, is leaving the party. Read, this hits the wheezing commercial real estate bubble at the worst possible time. On Wolf Street.com's website here. Again, I look at all this. I keep saying it. Economist magazine cover, 1988, 30 years from now to the date, 2018. Pencil in the Phoenix currency right around 2018 as too much debt. And all, right? It talks about all this stuff 30 years ago. This is no coincidence. They knew this was coming, which is probably why they don't care, which is probably why they're propping it up until they don't, crushing the likes of George Soros and possibly Kyle Bass here in the process when they are using, common sense. This market, the price to earnings ratios are massively overvalued. Like this isn't even kind of normal. They should come down. They don't come down. Okay, well that red flag says that thing's not even worth a thing. Snapchat, what the hell? Nope, worth tons. What? Right? So fundamentals don't mean anything anymore. The thermometer gauge that tells you it's 80 degrees outside, it isn't 80, it's 95. But if you look over at the thermometer, it says 85. That's because they control the thermometer. But you, with your own smarts and body, you can tell it ain't no freaking 80 degrees outside. It's 95 at least. And then since I'm in Florida and it's so damn humid, it feels like 100 or more. Sticky, sweaty hotness in Florida that we have sometimes here. Sometimes being every summer, if you will. But other than that, winter, spring, not summer, and fall, all you have to do is call. We have some pretty decent weather. Aside from a freaking hot summer with the damn humidity, other than that, it's a good spot to be, man. I'm happy with Florida. So yeah, I think they all know this. That's why they're all doing the same thing. They don't care about the debt. Keep going. It doesn't matter because this big reset, new currency, whatever it may be, is going to be coming to a planet near you soon. But again, for all of us to jump on board and be okay with that, we all have to feel some pain financially. Or we're not just going to agree to do it. I mean, are we? Oh yeah, that sounds good. I mean, maybe they'll come out and say, well, we've got 20-something trillion debt now and this and that. Look, there's no way to fund this. We've been kicking the can. We can't do it anymore. We've got to get rid of this. All this is going to get wiped out, and we're going to start over with this new world currency called the whatever. And but again, why everyone's gonna be like, well, hold on, you're wiping out all that debt. What about my debt? What about what I owe? Right? So people ain't gonna just buy into that like that. Everything has to be like destroyed, deflated into horse crap, so that it just seemed like this act of God happened, and you can't really point the finger at anybody. And well, let's just pick up the pieces and go over here. It looks like that's the best solution. That was painful. Don't want to do that again. That kind of thing. But it does remain to be seen. So that's it. Take care.